So I was living downtown in a posh building that had a good restaurant next door. The restaurant and the apartment building opened at the same time, so it automatically sort of became where everyone in the building went. And I worked across the street, so it was also where my firm would have client meetings and happy hours and whatnot. So I went in one night alone near closing time, which I had done in the past, and sat at the bar. I had been out that evening to happy hour, but that had been several hours before, and I had been home since then. I ordered a steak dinner and a glass of wine, my favourite. I was familiar with the bartender because of the happy hours, and one specific first date where the guy I was meeting, who was from Poland, recognised the bartender's accent as Serbian. But they had had some geopolitical banter while we had drinks, and the bartender seemed like an okay guy at the time. Mid-20s, average, nondescript. On this night, though, I'm sure that we had some small talk while we worked, but I don't think I actually engaged all that much with him. I didn't even really know his name. Anyway, halfway through my meal, I just get ridiculously tired, like barely keep your eyes open tired. I asked for a box for my meal. He took a while getting it, but when he presented it, he told me that he was walking me home. Obviously, I said, no thanks, and he insisted. 3 more times, mind you, which, at that point, I probably could have used the help walking, but was fully annoyed at being told someone was walking me home. Not only was I clear that he was not welcome to do that, I actually had a habit of never letting a guy walk me to any door. I don't like randos to know where I live, and I once had an acquaintance try to push in with me after an all-building cocktail party. So yeah, there was no way that this was going to happen, no matter what. I remember I got loud and with a final no, and I took a few more sips of wine. Hey, I paid $20 for that glass and I was not going to waste it, as I stood to leave. He seemed a little taken aback. He snatched up my glass and said that he was coming with me, so I remember that I simply left before he could do or say anything else. And well, I made it next door to my apartment and I was going in the elevator. I could hardly walk though, and I felt beyond drunk, even though I had barely finished half of my glass of wine. And when I made it to the 8th floor, I could barely stand. I literally crawled from the elevator down my very long hallway, around the corner and almost to my door. When I got within feet of my door, my legs had officially stopped working. I could barely climb up the door to insert the key, but somehow I managed to do it, and then I dragged myself over the threshold. I woke up the next day, slumped against my door, and I had wet myself. Now, I had never lost control of my body like that, no matter how drunk I've gotten, and I definitely have never slept on the floor when I dropped. It was honestly crazy and unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I had a hangover from hell, and I was trying to figure out all day what had happened. I told myself that since I'd been at happy hour earlier, maybe I was drunk and didn't know it when I went for my late meal. But I didn't remember feeling drunk when I was there, and I hadn't really eaten until the steak and the potatoes that I'd ordered. I kept searching for a reason, and it was a couple of days before I remembered how overly familiar the bartender had been in trying to walk me home. It chilled me what could have happened if that guy had walked me home. I had no proof that he had done anything, but somehow I just knew it was him. I felt stupid that I'd gone back out that night when I could have just eaten at home, and I felt stupid for not watching him more closely, even though I'd been alone at a bar. I felt stupid for going to the bar at all when I could have eaten at a table, but I just couldn't be sure enough of anything to report it to anywhere. I just kind of hid for a couple of months, refusing to walk by the window in front of the bar side of the restaurant and generally avoiding that corner altogether. And it was at least 2 months before I go back to that restaurant, and even then, it was only for work. I was relieved, though, when I didn't see him at the bar, but I had to ask in case he was coming later or something, and when I asked where he was, the person behind the bar said really flatly, "Oh yeah, him. He's gone. Well, we had to let him go." I remember searching the bartender's face for a clue and picked up on some mild disgust. So I said good or something to that effect, and he started to talk but thought better of it, and the conversation ended pretty much there. In the end, I have no idea where that guy ended up or what happened and why he was fired, but I'm almost 100% certain that I was drugged that night, and he was trying to take me home. About 2 years ago, when I was 17, I received a Facebook message from someone named Dan who I didn't recognize. I had mutual friends with him, and he looked to be around the same age as me, so I wasn't too alarmed. But what follows is the messages. Dan says, "Hello, how have you been? Haven't seen you in a few years." I say, "Hi, not trying to be rude, but do we know each other?" Yeah, you really don't know me?" I didn't respond. "Wow, real nice way to treat a family friend." "Sorry, I just don't recognize you." Dan then sent a picture of me and him together from when we were little. And I mean really little. Like, I looked maybe 2 or 3 and he looked 5 or 6. I say, "Oh wow, did our parents used to be friends or something?" "I was your neighbor," he says. "You really don't recognize me?" "Come on, I didn't move that long ago." He had in fact moved a long time ago, at least 12 years in fact. So I honestly feel like it's not that uncommon for me to not recognize someone who I hadn't seen or talked about since I was like 4. Anyways, the conversation continued like that. I apologized for not remembering him and just started catching up. He was being nice enough and I was bored, so whatever, right? No harm, no foul. After we kept talking, I started remembering more about him, though. Like, I remembered him coming over and swinging in my backyard, and me going over to his house with my big brother, and all of us hanging out together and whatnot. Dan was a few years older than me, at least 2, but I can't remember exactly. We kept talking on Facebook, though, just messaging back and forth about normal things until it started to get late and I was tired and had school the next day, so I told him that I was going to go to bed. I closed my computer and just laid down and I went to sleep. The next morning I woke up to a bunch of messages from him and things like, "Good night, beautiful," "Sweet dreams," "Message me when you wake up," "Are you asleep yet?" "Can't wait to talk to you." Literally, there was almost 50 messages. In a way, I was kind of flattered, I must admit, that I was getting that much attention, but like more than anything, I was creeped out. I opened the messages and kind of glanced through them, and eventually I just didn't reply. On my phone, I have it set where I don't get notifications from Facebook Messenger. At the time, I was in a lot of group chats with different team sports and groups of friends, so it was just easier to, at the end of the day, check my messages versus getting a ton of notifications all day long. At some point, though, during the day, I had gotten more messages from him that I just hadn't noticed while I was at school, and he was saying stuff like, "Do you still live at my address?" And I did still live there. "Does your mum still freak out about hanging out with boys?" What? "No, my mum never has freaked out over boys. But let's go out and catch up. Let me take you out and treat you right." And it just kept going on, and really random questions that weren't necessarily threatening, but just somewhat creepy, and then him talking about riding to go on dates that he didn't even live in the same state anymore that I lived in, so I had no idea how he would have planned on going on dates with me, but the whole thing was just kind of annoying in the end. The messages just kept continuing over the next week, with him telling me that he wants to go on dates and asking me really weird questions about my mum, my brother, and my house, and then he started asking about his house that he used to live in. I didn't really reply to any of his messages, but I was getting at least 50 a day at this point. I'm not sure why I didn't block him. I think I was just kind of entertained in a way, like I thought it was funny. Eventually, I brought it up to my mum and just asked her if she remembered Dan from next door. And her face completely drained of color, and she got super serious all of a sudden, and she asked me why I was bringing him up. I told her that he had messaged me on Facebook and was trying to get me to go on a date with him and was just trying to catch up. I didn't tell her that he'd been messaging me 50 plus times a day and that I wasn't responding at this point. And she told me to block him and never message him again. I asked her why, obviously, and this is a summary of what she told me. When I was 3 or 4, I used to play over at his house a lot. his mum would always offer to babysit me if my mum had to go quickly out to run errands and shop and whatnot, and he also had a little sister who was around my age, so my mum figured that it was a perfect opportunity for a play date between Dan, my brother, me, and Dan's little sister. One day, when I came home after one of these play dates, my mum was asking me and my brother what we had done that day. My brother started talking about how we had watched some movie, I don't know what one, and I apparently told my mum that Dan had brushed my hair for me. My mum thought that was a little bit weird. I mean, what 6-year-old boy is going to want to brush a 3-year-old girl's hair? So she asked a couple more questions. She doesn't really remember the details, and I don't really remember them either, seeing as I was a toddler, but somehow it came out that he wasn't brushing my hair. He had been taking a brush and was rubbing it all over my body while I was only in my undies. I'm not going to get more explicit than that, and no, nothing more serious happened, thank God. It was more just weird than anything, but my brother didn't know anything about this because we had been in Dan's room and my brother had been in the living room with Dan's little sister. And after that, my mum never let me go back over to his house. Apparently, when my mum confronted his mum about it, a huge fight broke out. Not physically, but a screaming match. And it turns out that Dan had been doing similar stuff to his little sister, but it had escalated farther than it had with me. My mum threatened to report them to the police or Child Protective Services, as she did both in the end. But before much could be done, they moved out and found somewhere else to live. They were renting the house at the time. After hearing that from my mum, I immediately blocked Dan on Facebook. I wasn't quick enough, I guess, however, because he messaged a bunch of my friends on Facebook asking about me and had changed his relationship status to taken and in a relationship with me. He then followed me on Instagram and found my Snapchat somehow. He liked and commented on almost all of my Instagram pictures and sent me a bunch of Snapchats. And I have a feeling that you may be able to guess the kinds of pictures he sent. And I quickly blocked him on both, and luckily he never figured out my phone number. I haven't heard from him since then, and I haven't heard anything about him, but I sure do hope that I never meet Dan ever again. So this happened back in mid-October of 2010. I think it was October the 13th, probably a Wednesday. I have a pretty good memory. So me, 18, my cousin Anna, 18, and my sister Ashley, 14, and my sister's boyfriend Bob, 16, were all hanging out at my house, and like we usually did, we decided that we wanted to go and smoke. So Bob hit up one of his friends who told him that we could meet up at the Shell, which was about a mile or two straight down the road from my house. Literally a 2-minute drive. The problem was, nobody had a car, so he would have to walk to go and get it. But not really a big deal. Like I said, it wasn't that far. The only problem was that it was dark outside because it was fall. So even at like 6 PM, it's already really dark in New England, and the road that I live on leading up to the Shell goes downhill. And it's all flat ground with only one streetlight in front and an abandoned shopping plaza that is now used as a truck yard. It's quite dark, so he and my sister decided that they're going to go walk together to get the stuff. Now, my cousin Anna and I, being the bored kids that we were, thought that we would go and follow them less than 10 minutes after they left. I'm a very on-edge type of person. I've seen 1,000,001 horror movies, and I also have hypervigilance, so going outside at night in the dark on a long stretch of quiet road is very out of character for me. In the daytime, I walk this road with no problem, but at night it's pretty creepy. But I wanted to get out of the house, and I didn't want to look like a chicken. So we started walking, and the further we get away from my house, I already feel nervous for some reason, like I shouldn't be outside in the cold at night by myself, even though I live in a safe small town, albeit bordered by a larger scary city, and that is where the Shell is located. And it just seems cold, so we walk faster to try and catch up with Ashley and Bob, but they're too far ahead of us. Well, we keep walking, and eventually we make it down the hill, and we're approaching the truck stop, and I'm relieved because there's finally a streetlight again. But suddenly, my relief is cut short. I just feel a deep sense of dread in the pit of my stomach as I see a small car drive up to us and slowly stop. I looked, wide-eyed, into the car, and I see 4 men in these terrifying flesh-colored expressionless masks just staring at us. I immediately lose it, scream as loud as I can and start running backwards into the dark where all the trucks are. The car takes off and I run up to Anna, who at this point is laughing, something she does when she's nervous or scared, and I tell her that we need to hide immediately because they're going to come back and look for us. So we bolt over to this old shopping cart port that looks like it had a car inside of it, but really it only has the top half of the car, so you wouldn't think someone could be hiding in there. We kneel down and peek our eyes out, and what do you know, this car comes circling back into the truck yard super slowly, right in front of us. I am just watching them look for us, just frozen in fear. They stop dead in their tracks looking at the carport, and then they leave. I had my phone on me, but it didn't have service at the time, and Anna didn't have a phone, so our only options at this point were to keep walking and be vulnerable to whoever was in that car finding us again, or call the cops. I, obviously, called the cops. But for some reason, they didn't take us very seriously. They thought it was a Halloween prank because we actually found out that they targeted my sister and Bob, who got split up. My sister said that they followed her as she was walking with Bob and said that they kept driving past him. But I don't think it was a prank. I mean, they weren't wearing like silly or crazy masks, but the masks that they had on were pretty creepy and had no expression. Plus, they all had on black hoodies, and something tells me that they were from the projects across the street from the Shell and were either looking for someone to kidnap, rob, or possibly worse. For whatever reason, my sister and Bob weren't as affected as me, but whenever I bring this story up to Anna, she just doesn't want to talk about it. And no, they were never caught. I'm around 18 years old at the time, sitting in my bedroom and, no bullshit, watching The Purge for the first time. My bedroom window only had one latch out of the two locked because I would smoke out of it at night, being too afraid to go outside alone around 1 a.m. Now, during the movie, I kept hearing a light scratching sound, and I thought it was probably just another cat under the house or something. After about 5 minutes, I pause the movie and hear it again, but this time it's a little bit louder. Getting kind of creeped out, I reached under my curtain and pushed the unlock side of my window down and locked it. Looking back, the fact that that one part of the window was fucking pried open definitely should have alarmed me. But I sit back down and I hear a loud slam come from the bathroom. I run out to go and check, and the blinds have fallen off. I ran straight to my parents' bedroom, and my dad immediately knew that something was wrong. He gets up in all of his manly glory with a 45 and his tight white undies and runs out of the back door to search the yard. He didn't see anyone, and we decided to call the cops in the morning. My nephew was staying overnight that night, and we figured that there was no point in freaking him out over what we felt was nothing. So the next day, we take a look around. My window had scratch marks from a fucking crowbar and the ledge was dented, as if someone was actually trying to pry my window open. And whoever it was wore socks on their hands or something to try and push up the glass because there were no handprints. There were just two long and dragged out marks the size of adult hands going upward. Mind you, my windows were very dirty, so it was pretty easy to see. But we lived in a very small town in Louisiana, so the police chief, who knew my parentals, came to the house for a formal report. He kept insisting that it was either a friend or maybe a boyfriend who couldn't get in touch with me. But one, everyone I know knew my dad was always well armed and did not play that shit. 2, my cell is always on and I always answer, especially for friends at 1 in the morning. 3, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Friends don't wear socks on their hands and try to jimmy your window open late at night. At least, not without calling out your name first. We never did find out who it was or what they wanted. And what still scares me, even 10 years later, is that the house was not quiet. The TV and a lamp or two were on in the living room. The bathroom light was on, and my bedroom was very well lit since I was watching a horror movie. Yet, this person still tried to get in through 2 different windows? The worst part is that if our bathroom window weren't so shitty, they would have made it in too. To keep it open, my mum would use an old broom handle to hold it up, and unless there's something keeping it up, it immediately slams back down, which is most likely why the blinds came down and a loud slam was heard. It may just be me, but I'm pretty sure that whoever it was wanted something from in our house so badly that they didn't care who was inside or if they were awake. And if I would have opened that curtain before locking my window, it could have either scared them off or possibly motivated them more to get in if their face was seen. Either way, it was a near miss, for sure. My mother, my grandma, and I live in the same house, but in 2 different flats in a very short street with only 6 houses total. We moved here in 2012, and everything was fine. One day, though, there was an old man moving into another house in the street. He seemed really nice, but my image of him changed quickly when the incidents began. My grandma lives in the 1st floor, so everyone walking past the house can technically look into her flat when she has the blinds open. And she started telling us about how she'd seen sometimes 2 feet under the blinds of the big windows, always the same shoes. One day, she pulls them up while the shoes are there, and guess who it is? Yeah, the old man. Turns out that he's been watching her for quite some time through her windows and even from his balcony, from which he has a perfect view of the big window in her living room. As if that wasn't bad enough, though, he started talking to me when I got home from school because I need to pass by his house. We didn't know each other, we had nothing to do with each other, not even remotely, so it was a bit strange. He begins asking, though, how I was, if school was finally over, and so on. I didn't like that, but I just politely answered. And one day, he started asking about my grandma and mother, how they're going, etc., and I was a little bit creeped out by this, given the history of the incidences. So I just started ignoring him, and after a few days of that, he eventually got the hint. Now, my grandma has a sort of caregiver who comes to her flat twice a week to clean and go grocery shopping with her because she can't walk or bend over that well anymore. But this caregiver is also the one that comes to our stalking neighbor to help him. After my grandma brought it up that he'd been watching her the other day, the caregiver told us that the old man would want hugs from her, look at her ass, with cleavage and everything, and also sometimes touch her in places like her waist or her thighs unintentionally. And as if this wasn't already more than terrifying, he also rides the bus sometimes, and sometimes I'm in that same bus, or even rides the school bus for some weird reason. Anyways, one day I was waiting for the bus and there was a girl with a hijab, a headscarf, waiting for the bus too. The man walks up to her and starts talking to her. I had my headphones in, so out of curiosity, I put one out and listened to what he was talking about. And I was shocked when I heard how he was talking about immigrants being a problem for us, and how they should get out of our country and such, but in a way that he didn't say it directly, but rather hinted at those things. The girl was really confused, obviously, and then the bus already came, which she was relieved about, understandably too. I mean, how awkward. But this guy's creepy behavior just seems to be escalating, and I don't know. What do you guys think we should do? G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.